Eric Gitari in the court case that forced Kenya to acknowledge queer lives. Nairobi, Kenya. For decades, Kenya's position on sexual minorities followed a careful contradiction. Same-sex relationships were criminalized under colonial-era laws. Public officials regularly condemned homosexuality as an African. Religious leaders warned of moral collapse. And yet, the Constitution of Kenya, adopted in 2010, promised something different: freedom of association, equality before the law, and protection from discrimination. It was this contradiction that lawyer Eric Gitari placed squarely before the courts. A legal system built on silence. In the early 2010s, LGBTQ+ people in Kenya existed in a legal gray zone. They were not formally outlawed as individuals, but any attempt to organize, advocate, or even register community groups was blocked by the state. The government's reasoning was consistent and blunt. Recognizing LGBTQ+ organizations would amount to promoting homosexuality. As a result, queer-led groups were denied registration by the Non-Governmental Organizations Coordination Board, leaving them unable to operate legally. Without registration, organizations could not open bank accounts, sign leases, employ staff, receive funding, or publicly provide services. This bureaucratic barrier functioned as quiet erasure. LGBTQ Kenyans were not arrested en masse, they were simply denied existence on paper. Who Eric Gitari is? Eric Gitari, born in 1982, is a Kenyan lawyer and human rights defender trained in constitutional law. He was not seeking to provoke a cultural debate. His argument was technical, legal, and rooted in Kenya's own constitution. In 2013, Gitari applied to register the Gay and Lesbian Coalition of Kenya, GALCK, umbrella organization representing several LGBTQ+ groups working on health, legal aid, and community support. The application was rejected. The NGO board argued that registering GALC would violate public morality and promote illegal conduct. Gitari responded by filing a constitutional petition. The case before the High Court. Gitari's legal argument avoided rhetoric and focused instead on constitutional principles. The Constitution guarantees freedom of association to all persons. No Kenyan law prohibits the formation of LGBTQ+ organizations. Criminal statutes on same-sex conduct do not justify denying constitutional rights. The state cannot apply moral judgment selectively. At its core, the case asked a narrow but dangerous question: can the government deny rights to a group of citizens simply because it disapproves of who they are? The 2015 judgment. In April 2015, the High Court of Kenya ruled in favor of Eric Gitari. The court held that LGBTQ+ persons are entitled to constitutional protections. Denying registration to GALC violated freedom of association. Moral disapproval is not a legal basis for discrimination. The NGO board was ordered to register the Gay and Lesbian Coalition of Kenya. It was the first time a Kenyan court explicitly affirmed that sexual minorities have enforceable constitutional rights. The ruling did not decriminalize homosexuality. It did not end discrimination or violence. But it did something unprecedented. It made legal erasure unconstitutional. Backlash and consequences. The ruling was met with immediate hostility. Politicians denounced the judgment. Religious leaders called it dangerous. Media commentary framed Gitari as a threat to Kenyan values. Gitari himself faced harassment and threats, but the legal precedent remained intact, and it reshaped the terrain of queer advocacy in Kenya. After 2015, LGBTQ+ organizations could register legally. Advocacy groups could open offices and bank accounts. Courts had language to defend queer citizens. Human rights litigation gained a foothold. Much of Kenya's subsequent LGBTQ+ legal advocacy, including cases on forced anal examinations and police abuse, built directly on this foundation. Beyond the courtroom, Eric Gitari's career did not remain confined to LGBTQ litigation. He later became executive director of Amnesty International Kenya, one of the country's most prominent human rights institutions, a role that placed him at the center of national debates on governance, police accountability, and civil liberties. The trajectory is notable. A man once told his identity disqualified him from legal recognition, went on to lead one of Kenya's. Why the case still matters. Kenya continues to criminalize same-sex relationships. Violence, discrimination, and social exclusion remain common. But one thing changed permanently in 2015. The state can no longer pretend queer people do not exist. Eric Gitari did not ask Kenya to approve of LGBTQ+ lives. He asked it to obey its own constitution, and in doing so, he forced the law to say something it had long avoided saying out loud: that rights do not depend on popularity, that citizenship is not conditional, and that silence, once written into law, can be challenged. History does not always move through protests or parades. Sometimes it moves through court filings, legal reasoning, and a refusal to accept invisibility as policy.
This was one of those moments, history of the queer Kenya, where progress begins, not with applause, but with precedent.